right, we're live back again. Had a little break, but excited about this summer edition. We got a great conversation today. It is August, tail end of the summer, but we're had an interesting couple of months.
And finishing strong.
Finishing strong with the Mac.
Most importantly.
You want to talk a little bit about the Mac or not?
Nah, we got an important conversation, man. Important guest today, man.
Very important guest today. Actually, it's our privilege to have this conversation. And for anybody that's listening for the first time, maybe doesn't know a little bit about the background of the platform, Policy and Culture was built really to educate our community, our culture, our leaders about the power of being civically engaged. We like to talk about what are the two main things when you wake up and walk outside the door is who are you and what do you do? And your role in a civic society, educating our culture about how important this is. It's not a new thing. This is something that's been going on for thousands of years. And we seem to somewhere have lost touch a little bit about that. And so that's what policy and culture is. Also, educating our community about how to navigate the politics of our culture. So we have a brother here today that has done tremendous things in the state of New York, actually has created history. It's a privilege for us to have him on this conversation today and also on this platform. And it's somebody that really truly embodies the definition of policy and culture. So we're very pleased to welcome Christopher Alexander, who is the newly appointed executive director of the NAACP New York State Conference, one of the nation's most storied civil rights organizations. He's also a seasoned government executive, policy strategist, and advocate. Chris previously served as the founding executive director of the New York's Office of Cannabis Management, where he launched a $500 million market and created over 10,000 jobs. I want to say that again real quick, though.
Major.
Previously served as the founding executive director of New York's Office of Cannabis Management. Drew, break that down a little bit for the policy. What are we talking about? What was he just the leader of?
He was the honcho of the marijuana industry. He was leading the force in New York with the marijuana industry. So gumbo, jelly gumbo, Kush, OG Kush, all of those strains that we like, my man right here made it possible for us to really say we legalized in New York.
Legalized and safe, matter of fact. With deep experience in legislative affairs, criminal justice reform, and movement organizing, Chris brings a fresh yet grounded vision to the NAACP's ongoing mission to protect civil rights and expand opportunity for communities across New York. In this conversation, we explore how policy, equity, and power intersect and what it means to lead a legacy institution into the future that's changing rapidly. We're seeing a lot of things happen right now on the federal level, on the state level, and the local level. So you are in a very unique position right now, Chris. So without further ado, welcome to Policy and Culture.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thank you so much for having me, y'all.
Absolutely.
It's long overdue, too. We've been
overdue.
talking about
Absolutely,
it for a while.
Absolutely. Definitely long overdue. And I appreciate you coming to the island, too.
Yeah, no problem. I'm from Queens, so
it's a
we're
little trek. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So within the conversation, we really like to get a better understanding of your journey. Like we mentioned already, these roles that you've had, the leadership roles, that's not something to just overlook. That doesn't just happen by chance. That doesn't just happen by luck. Maybe a lot of relationships, but there's journeys there that get into those relationships. Can you just talk to us a little bit about where you're from, that 5-6-year-old Chris Alexander? What was that like?
Oh, man. So I'm a first-generation American.
Okay.
Both of my parents born and raised on the island of Grenada. So our connection to the Caribbean is very much a part of my life. Would spend summers back on the island with my grandparents. Always grounded in family, which was kind of the guiding force. When I growing up here, my first friends were my family, it was my cousins. And so we were able to kind of protect each other while also kind of growing in this new space together. So I didn't really have a particular goal growing up, as most people, just figuring it out, playing ball, just hanging out, chasing girls, whatever. But my father was somebody who was very much so like, if you want to complain about something, like go do something. And he passed several years ago, but that kind of grounded of like take ownership of situations was something that really helped guide me early on and, kept me focused.
You grew up in Queens?
I grew up in Queens.
What
Born and
part of
raised in Hollis, Queens.
Hollis, Queens.
Yeah,
Okay.
me and my wife live in Jamaica now.
Legendary neighborhood over there in Hollis.
Course.
Neighborhood over there in Hollis.
Is that Ja Rule?
Yeah,
Ja Rule's from Hollis.
Okay,
a lot of other
right.
people too.
Okay,
You know what I mean?
Run
We don't
D-
start with Ja. You start with Run DMC.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay. So where did you get like because you have a huge legal background and getting into a law firm. So was that in high school where you kind of got this interest in local government and politics, or becoming a lawyer? How did that all start to evolve? But you mentioned ball. What is this? Football, basketball?
Played basketball growing up. High school, played football. Was not good enough to play at Syracuse, where I went to undergrad. But definitely, it was just something that kept us all going, kept us organized, make sure you connected to the community, etc. But in terms of getting the bug, right? And a lot of us call it, when you first decide you want to be involved, when you hear a speech or somebody motivates you to get involved. I would say probably around high school. Just being more aware of the world. As a freshman, reading the autobiography of Malcolm X was something that incredibly motivated me to open my eyes. I read that book in like 3 days. I just could not put it down.
Was this after watching the movie, or like?
Oh, I read the book before I watched the movie.
Read the movie? Okay.
I read the book before I watched the movie. His mom was from Grenada too, so that was and that's like the first page. So that kind of connected us. But just kind of having a great understanding of the fact that there's so much that happens in our daily lives, and really the theme of even the conversation is so much that impacts us that we have no control over sometimes, or we feel like we have no control over, or there's a great distance between us and the issues that are impacting us. And so it was early on in high school when I was like, okay, I need to find a way to get involved in some way. I took on some internships, did some organizing in the South Bronx around issues affecting young people's health. So that was kind of my first organizing experience. And then, later on, once I got to college, it was all set. I was kind of really focused on trying to be impactful. Not really interested in doing a lot of the jobs that I've had and the roles that I've had. Could not have anticipated any of them. But getting motivated to get engaged, that was clear by that time that was going to be something.
So before leaving Queens and getting to Syracuse, how was that accepted amongst your peers? Because you obviously made that decision. You said in high school you wanted to get involved. Coming from a neighborhood like Hollis that's kind of entrenched in hip hop culture, like Run DMC's from there. Like he said, Czar from there, Chris Gotti's from there, Irv Gotti's from there. That's a lot of heavy hitters that's coming from that neighborhood. Kind of going left, I would say, into politics and stuff. How was that accepted amongst your peers going into school, saying this is what I want to get involved in?
Well, I mean, that's not just the only makeup of the neighborhood, right? We also have an incredibly amount of what I call, working poor, right? We have a ton of public servants, right? Bus drivers and people who work in hospitals and that really provide the essential workers, I guess is the better term. That makes up the bulk of the community, people who have found a way to make a way and to create a space for their families. And so there was always a level of like knowing that people were out there. I used to get up with my father, who was a mailman, early in the morning and take the train with him into work. And to see like these working people on a day-to-day basis, just making that trek at 4:30 in the morning, nobody's up. They're just going in quietly to go to work and grind. It was a connection there. And then, once I got a little older and you started seeing the voting lines and started people starting to campaign in the area and all that stuff. And people were engaged. People were paying attention, even if they didn't feel as powerful. They were aware, but not as powerful because they were a lot of public servants and really those essential workers. So it was kind of like a thing that was kind of natural for me because there was a whole group of people, older folks in the neighborhood who understood the responsibility of being engaged. Southeast Queens is one of the most consistent voting blocks in New York City and New York State. Consistent and largest black voting block, actually. We've got a mayoral election happening and so goes Southeast Queens. That's how the decision is going to be made. It is a place where it is easy to understand that the collective is important, but it's not. It's that first jump of understanding your power. That's the thing. And that was a challenge for me, and I didn't really feel that until really getting halfway through my college experience.
What year we went to Syracuse?
I was in Cuse from 2008 to 2012.
Okay. So I was in Syracuse for a whole different reason. And,
we gonna talk about that?
No. I was an idiot. I got expelled from high school, so I had to go to like there's a program, Teen Challenge was called, for 6 months. Anyway, I'm saying that because it was 2003, and that's the year that Melo won the chip. So Syracuse was lit up there. It
Huge
was
fan
crazy.
of Carmelo.
Yeah.
You know, honored to meet him a couple times in these last couple of years doing this work. He just launched in the cannabis space as well.
Exactly, yeah. Stay mellow.
Yeah. So we were able to talk and chop it up. He showed me some
fire.
product.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
And his son, what's his son's name again?
Cayenne.
He's up
He's up next.
Yeah,
He's
so
doing
we'll
the
see
Qs.
freshman at Syracuse. What was that college experience like?
It was crazy. You know, my older brother was the first of the family to kind of go away to college. And then, you know, for my cousins and everything, right? So he was the first to go away. And, you know, I knew I was going to go away. I didn't know I was going to go to Cuse, but it was something that lined up perfectly. A couple of my friends that were a little older went. They had an amazing time. And when I got there, it was just so many different cultures, people that you don't interact with normally, being able to kind of be in the classroom with them, doing extracurriculars. And then, you know, by my sophomore year, I pledged Alpha. So we were locked in terms of the campus life, creating that vibe that was necessary. We were #1 party school for a little bit too.
Yeah,
we had a good time.
It gets crazy up there for sure.
And what I get from you speaking to you is like you knew already. I feel like you knew already. I feel like environment is kind of everything. That's kind of piggybacking off the last question that I had. Like that sense of pride that you knew. You saying you waking up, you seeing all of these working people. Did that instill that confidence in you to know that like this was my next step? I know this is what I was gonna do, and I'm gonna be successful at it.
Not confidence, but I think humility. You know what I mean? Like, you know, my dad, a mailman. My mom worked in the hospital my whole life growing up, and so just knowing that like the grind is kind of a part of life, right? And that no matter where you're going, we come from a place, and as long as that informs the journey, like. There's nothing that can take you off the path because I remember when, you know, that was the life where when we were, you know, in that grind together, just trying to provide for the family. And so I would say the grounding is what has allowed me to have the success that I've had, because even as I continue to have exposure to new things and new spaces, and I've had some crazy opportunities. You know what I mean? I was a 23-year-old field director running the most contentious congressional campaign in the country. That's an opportunity that happens because I worked hard, but I worked hard because I've seen what hard work looks like.
Nah, you've been in some like crazy. We're gonna get into it. But how old are you, by the way?
I'm 34 right now.
34 now.
Now.
So like, you know what I'm saying? Like that's wild, yo. Which race was that, by the way?
This was Dan Maffei running for Congress in Syracuse. That race. That seat has switched from Republican to Democrat every year for like 8 years straight. And I was there for 2 of those races. We won one, we lost one. But it was just a great representation of like what politics kind of becomes, right? It's margins. It's all in the margins. And we lost, you know, he lost one of his races by 648 votes. And it's a congressional district, 600,000 people. 648 votes decided whether the people in that district would have solid representation in Congress or not. And, you know, it was a huge motivating factor for me to see the ins and outs, but also campaigns are great. And we talked about this at the conference. Campaigns just a great way for young people interested in politics to start because you get to do so much in such a short period of time. And so I can go from, you know, my first race that I worked on in 2010, helping with fundraising, doing speech writing, helping with petitions, etc., to my you know, to 2012 and 2014 cycles where I was, you know, running a campaign that had, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars invested and millions of dollars put in, you know, from the outside to support the candidate. So it's a great place for you to do as much as you possibly can in a very short period of time. And I was just blessed to be in that right position.
Especially if you're interested in politics. From 2010 to 2012, that first time working in a campaign, what, in your opinion, are the things that you did that propelled you to get that lead role in 2012?
I worked harder than the people around me. Not to say that that it sounded bad. You know, the team was a strong one, but I think that you know, what I didn't see the race, and this, I know a critique that a lot of people have about politics, especially electoral politics. That race is a moment, you know, and people always say, especially the Black community, you know, the politicians come around when it's time for the vote and then they disappear. And so what I focused on was just building that political power locally, right? And telling people and informing people that their way to participate it's constant. It's not just through a vote, right? You can help steer policy if you're in the room, right? If you're at the table. And that's a forever, year-long journey. And so my approach to all of the campaigns that I worked, which was really the start of my professional career, was this isn't about a single day. How do we create a situation where this infrastructure exists, where people can, have a real voice in deciding who their representation is, and then steer that representation the right way when there's a moment, when there's a question of, is this the right vote, or is this one? Is this the right priority, or is it this one? To make sure that infrastructure exists for them to check in. You got my vote, you went on to Congress or to, whatever representative body. Now you're getting asked the tough questions. Come back and check with us before you make that decision. That's what I tried to create in those roles, and that's, I think, led to some of the success.
Yeah. All good stuff. We was in the process of speaking about civics and stuff like that. Just for our viewers, could you explain what building up that local power looked like? What was that? What did that entail?
Well, people are familiar, I think less so, because they might mean a little bit less, the Democratic clubs and stuff like that, the civic engagement organizations, those still exist largely across the country and definitely here in New York. But what the infrastructure for me, more than that, is having each kind of segment of society, the business community, understanding that they have a way in to communicate with an elected official. And obviously, the business community does it the most and the best as we see it on a day-to-day. But for our faith leaders to make sure that they have a direct line, who are community leaders, for our influencers who are not, this is a new generation of influence, because we used to just call them community organizers, and our community leaders, making sure that they understand that they are respected because of what they do, that they are treated not just as an aspect of a community, but as a problem solver in the community. If I'm an elected official and I know that we've got a tough decision to make, whether I'm representing my community in city council or in the state government, I'm gonna go tap in with the people who are most tapped in. You know what I mean? And because as you go up the ladder in electoral politics, you get further away from the people just naturally, right? Because your district is bigger. It's too many people. It's too hard to get around. And so it's important that you invest in those people who are still on the ground and who are closest to the problems. And that was something that, as I transitioned from political, electoral work to issue advocacy, that was incredibly important. Yeah. If you are not talking to the people closest to the problem, you are not going to be able to solve the problem. Yeah. Not really, anyways.
Yeah. 2012, Syracuse is also, I believe, Obama's second election. Mm-hmm. So that was probably a huge factor.
Amazing.
What was going on
Amazing.
at that time.
Running a campaign at that time, and then I ended up going down to Congress. I worked in the 113th Congress as a legislative coordinator, right? When people write in about bills and issues.
Oh, you went to D.C.?
I went to D.C. It's a lot. We was moving around.
We found it out right now. We connected it right now.
He got the major outliers of his thing.
Nah, that's a
Obama
fact.
campaign, and all of that.
Yeah. Well, I didn't work directly from Obama, but being a part of the infrastructure.
DC while he's in
I'm just saying
running.
at that time, that was a major outlier right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so being at his inauguration was one of the most powerful moments of my life. You know what I mean? Just being there and hearing this man galvanize people from all different walks of life. And anybody who was doing political work at that time, we all followed the Obama organizing model, right? Which is all about finding that personal connection to both the voter or, whoever you're dealing with and talking to bring them into politics. It was always about inclusion. It was always about finding a way to pull people in. And that stayed with me. That training has stayed with me forever, right? And I think that what my wife jokes about often is I will be, this is, aside, but I would be in, doing the press conference or talking to the governor or talking to this and I'm going to say, what I'm saying? I can't, it's hard to change because the goal is always connecting, right? And pulling people in. So it's easiest if I'm authentic.
Code switching?
Yeah. So my minimized, you do it when you're talking about certain things, but the minimal code switching is the thing that she's you can't keep saying, to the elected official. You know what I mean? That's not how they talk. But it's how I talk. So it's a way for us to continue to stay connected.
And as long as the
point is getting across.
The point is getting across, but also especially the younger generation can see right through an individual. So as long as that there's some type of honesty, and transparency, and I think people don't care if it's good or bad. Is long as it's right there.
As long as it's real.
As long as it's real.
And that's what you find when people have these moments or these candidates have these moments of kind of surreal, energy around them. Mm-hmm. It's always because they found a way to tap into the things that's real for people.
Even to the pain sources and whatnot.
Yep.
All right, so 2012, that's an incredible year of time for you. I'm assuming you must have went to law school.
I didn't go to law school until I finished my time doing in Congress. So I came back to New York end of 2014, and 2015 I started law school at the same time while I was beginning, picking up my issue advocacy work, which really began around like stop and frisk in New York, which at the time was just at its height. I decided that, while I loved the, athletes, we love campaigning, right? The competition of it. It is something that is hard to shake that adrenaline of election night and the votes coming in. Yeah. But I wanted to have a different type of impact. And so transitioning to issue area campaigns and just issue advocacy was something that was really important to me. And Stop and Frisk was so huge, it was hard to.
Who was that, de Blasio or Bloomberg?
Well, Stop and Frisk really started
really from Giuliani. I'm just saying
yeah.
at that time, I don't remember. Was that?
Well, at that time, de Blasio was mayor.
Okay.
He ran against Stop and Frisk. It continued during his term, but Bloomberg took Stop and Frisk and made it like, a machine. Whether to the point where they were stopping more young Black and brown men than actually live in the city. Yeah. Which means that they were stopping them twice. Yep. They stopped them on the way to work or school, and they stopping them on the way back.
And to tie this into the later in the conversation, one of the biggest things with Stop and Frisk and how so many young people were getting arrested, including myself a couple times. Now, I never had to stay that long, but it was a couple times where I did get pulled over and I had a little dime bag or something, and then I had to go to a holding cell, was marijuana.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was the whole narrative was that they were looking for guns, but all they found was weed. And so it was ruled unconstitutional in practice, the way that it was being implemented. And so I came in really riled up around that policy and that issue, but the fact that the consequence of it ended up being all of these cannabis charges was really what kind of got me going and helped me find my lane to really be impactful. What would happen, and this is kind of a quick little history lesson, I'll be super brief on it, but New York was 1971, war on drugs is launched. 1977, we had seen enforcement for a little bit.
That's Nixon, by the way.
Yep, yes, Nixon. But 1977, by that time, we started to see a lot of the white kids, really out here from Long Island, who were getting hit, and because federal drug policy and the drug war was so pervasive that, these kids were being denied opportunities to go to college. And so the legislators in New York were saying, well, there's got to be another way to do this. And so we were one of the first states to decriminalize in 1977. Think about that. We were the marijuana arrest capital of the world, but in 1977, we decriminalized cannabis for personal use.
In New York.
Right.
1977.
But what we did was we created a little bit of a carve out, but we call it a loophole, right? Possession on your person, possession in the home is not a criminal offense. But the second that marijuana is made public, it's a misdemeanor. It's a criminal offense. Now, you take that policy that was in place from 77 and you layered it on top of Stop and Frisk, which begins in 96-ish and kicks up, and then Bloomberg takes it and it goes through the roof. You have literal entrapment. You have cops telling people to empty their pockets and producing marijuana in small amounts that otherwise wouldn't have been a criminal offense, but for the cops telling you to empty your pockets. Now you got a 1.2 million arrests for cannabis in New York over that time frame, right? And that's kind of the ways that, like, how I, criminal justice is my background now, but how I do, whether it be legislative drafting or even just policy making, is I understand we've got to be thinking about the intentional and the unforeseen consequences of anything that we're rolling out, especially those that's going to be impacting those who are oftentimes without protection or most vulnerable in New York. And so really that issue, that entrapment, the use of the odor of cannabis to arrest people, I would sit in arraignments at night in Queens Court and just sit and listen. And case after case, I had an officer coming up, somebody saying, oh, I found it in his sock. And the judge just, all right, misdemeanor offense, well, you got to come back. And everybody's just like, hey, it's cool. And the person is happy to get out and not have to sit in jail. But I'm saying, like, that was in his sock. I'm reading the law. I'm like, this doesn't line up. And so, in that time, it was definitely a really that feeling of helplessness, but knowing and seeing the problem was something that, like, it just drove me. And so we worked from then For years and years, we built up a statewide campaign, and we were able to obviously eventually legalize. But the goal initially was just stopping this abuse of power.
Now, what's that journey though? Because there's a lot of intricacies, and when we talk about the politics of our culture, it's not easy to navigate the realms that you were in, and at the same time being, I'm assuming at this time, you must be like, what, 24, 25?
Yeah, still young, yeah.
A black man at that, and still being able to navigate the ladders of influence and power. So could you just give some wisdom of young people that are listening to this that want to get involved into this game? Because me and Drew are always talking. It's like there's so many different barriers you got to navigate. It's not always a specific race or not always a specific monetary value. It's just having the intuition of understanding the game. And can you talk a little bit about in that period of how you're now navigating to get into potentially the role of not the executive director, but the president of Office of Cannabis Management?
Well, no, the title was executive director,
Okay.
but the role is the commissioner,
Okay.
right? I was a state commissioner at OCM. But in terms of navigating that, the one thing, a huge piece of advice that I don't think people really, we live in a recency culture where folks are interested in getting to that next gig. You know what I mean? They're interested in getting to the next job. They're trying to chase the bag, whatever it may be. Developing an expertise is something that they cannot take away from you.
Yeah.
Understanding the nuance of an issue in a way that nobody else does is something that they cannot take away from you. You know, we built a campaign. I want a big shout out to Cassandra Frederic, who is a change maker and one of the greatest leaders that I've seen in terms of getting people who don't care about an issue to care and be invested in an issue. She and the organization, the Drug Policy Alliance, gave me that opportunity to lead this campaign. Now, it was a lot of work leading and building this campaign, simultaneously being in law school at night, and then also drafting what would become New York's legalization law. That was all happening at the same time for me. But I knew that the work that was being put in, those nights, those days, those weekends. We had our first daughter, and the joke was that I would have to carry her. I would have her on the carrier as I'm doing like public speaking engagements. I'm doing workshops, and I have her with me. But I just knew that was an important grind. One, because I've seen work, and I've also seen the impact of this problem that needed to be addressed. And so developing that expertise is crucial advice. And as we went through it, we built up a campaign. I ended up leaving the Drug Policy Alliance and was brought into government for the particular purpose of negotiating this bill, right? The Senate called me for the purpose, and shout out to Andrea Stewart-Cousins, the leader of the Senate.
Majority leader
of the New York State Senate, and Chantel Smith, who was the chief counsel, who was the one who pulled me and said, hey, we're going to be working on this issue soon. We're going to need somebody that knows it inside and out. And so they called me to come in and help negotiate and, continue drafting New York's legalization law. It took some more years after that.
Yeah.
But the expertise was the thing that got me that opportunity.
Love it. Talk a little bit about that time before we jump into your current role of just how did that feel when you really got into that commissioner role in this new department in the biggest state, the most influential city probably in America.
Yeah.
Definitely the financial capital of the globe, and you're running this entire new industry. Did you feel a lot of pressure?
Oh, incredible. But it wasn't so much because of the stage, right? The stage wasn't too big. And one of my mentors, would always say, don't let the stage get too big for you. It wasn't so much the stage. It was just the fact that so many people were counting on us to do this right. And tons of hiccups later. But I go back to the time of drafting and negotiating and building the campaign. I remember there was a moment when, when it was just became very clear to me that every state had tried to find a way to deal with the illicit market, right? And what they did was just increase enforcement tools. They all had a barrier to entry. If you had a conviction, especially if you had a marijuana conviction, you could not get a license. Right. And so when we were organizing around the issue, when we're drafting the law, all those things, I'm sitting with the move, I'm sitting with the dealers. I'm like, how do we get you into this market? And we didn't have solutions then. And they made clear that this was an issue it was more than an issue of logistics. It was an issue of trust. We don't believe, why would we believe that the government is going to do anything that try to benefit us? Because these are people who, yes, they're engaged in the trade, but more than that, they've been forgotten. They've been left behind. They've been left out of opportunities. The convictions that they may have for a low-level possession or a low-level sale sat with them forever. That meant they couldn't get access to public housing. That meant they couldn't get access to funding for higher education. If you lived in public housing with your grandma and you got a drug, you got to go. You get kicked out. And so I spent all this time with those folks who, essentially grounded us and like, whatever you do, this is what it has to look like. It has to be inclusive. And knowing and spending the time with other markets, we understood that if we don't find a way to incorporate these people, we won't win the competition. So we've got to find a way to bring them in so that they can help grow the market. And New York is the center, as you said, of the world, culture-wise, and cannabis, despite the fact that LA's market has been going for such a long time. There was no way we could legalize and get this done without incorporating everybody. And so it was just an understanding of all the different types of groups, the small farmers, the people who rely on cannabis for medicinal purposes. We can't let the medical program collapse. All of those things came into focus as we transitioned to the role. Be clear, I had no intention of becoming the commissioner. I didn't think that was a call that would ever come to me. And as we don't have enough time today, but that whole process, that year and a half, that year journey was insane before the appointment, which, we had a governor leave. We had a new governor come in. And one of the things hanging around during that time was my appointment to this role. And so it was an interesting time, but didn't feel pressure so much because of the size, felt pressure because of the people that now I had deep relationships and connections with that, we wanted to make sure we're able to participate. And I don't mean individual people, but I just meant people from places like where I'm from.
Yeah.
All good stuff, man.
One thing that I'm very interested in is, as a black man, there's always been a target, specifically in, unfortunately, let's just say street sales, right? And selling weed is and was and still kind of coexists with this legal market. And maybe even Drew, you tie this in, like, what do you think that this market is going to transition that and eliminate that in a way that individuals that have a brain processing to maybe be successful in that will actually get into this legalized process?
I mean, it depends on like the margin. It depends on the margin, what they paying now, what they getting now, if it's a storefront involved, if they're branding. A lot of that goes into play with it too. Depends on how serious they are with the business on it.
Yeah, and I would just say that we understood that there's nuance to people's current businesses, right, who are transitioning from the illicit market to the regulated market. And a lot of the folks that we were talking to, they're really doing more distribution than anything, right? And so what we did was create kind of avenues for everybody, depending on where you sit. Not everybody is situated to run a dispensary or wants to or is interested in.
But real quick, just because I think this is important, illicit sales, but distribution. Because illicit or legal, there's an actual process going on where there's a profit and loss, there's revenue, and then there's an exchange of need and goods, so to say. So I do want to kind of, in this conversation, those that are listening understand the shift that's happening and the opportunity to make that shift into a potential legal transaction, a legal distribution, because distribution is one of the biggest things. And that's literally what makes up, to go back to your role in society and a civilized society, a civilization, the most important thing is trade, is an exchange of goods. So that distribution, back in the day, was distribution of music, which is now digital. Distribution of anything that we're doing, this distribution of a podcast is on a platform. So that distribution is key. I'm specifically saying this so that people that are listening can understand that mental exchange of distribution that needs to happen.
Yeah, and one of the things that we created to make that distribution easier is what we call it's a white labeling license, basically, right? Where we have the small farmers who are leading, who are the most populated group, the most populous group of the cultivation tier, right? A lot of our growers in New York are small farmers, right? With apple farmers, dairy farmers, they transition their farms over to cannabis in order to save their farms, and so we have that happening. But they don't know how to create brands. They don't know what the culture is. And so we've got our out-of-state brands coming in, and some of them are working with them, those who've been long-standing a little bit. But New York brands, we have a white label license where you could be somebody who understands the culture, understands product, understands what a consumer wants, and you don't have to have a farm. You don't have to have some big business infrastructure. You just need to have the marketing dollars and the know-it-all to connect with one of these farmers, and now you got a brand in the market, right? And that's a license that's still available right now that people have been able to benefit from. So what I'm saying is basically is each segment of the industry pre-legalization had a pathway to transition into the regulated market. Now, I can't speak too much of what's going on right now because I think that some of that stuff has gotten lost in the bureaucracy. But the foundation of it is still there. We were able to quadruple the amount of Black-owned businesses, Black-owned dispensaries in the country, in New York, in like a year and a half, right? Like we just by saying, hey, if you are somebody who had a conviction, you were somebody who was harmed by this policy and the way it was implemented, you're the first in line to get the license, which is something that no state did. And we were the first to do that. And the market now is over 1.5 billion already. And so it worked. The goal is just to keep it going.
And that's 1.5 billion just New York?
That's just New York. Yeah. Everything made and sold in New York.
Yeah, that's crazy. So in 2024, you had a transition.
Yeah.
And rest in peace to the legendary, iconic Dr. Hazel Dukes, where you were appointed the executive director of New York State NAACP conference. When I saw that, I was like, ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, like that.
That's very interesting. That was a good, another good pivot. Another good pivot transition. Primarily for me, when I looked at it, I was like, one, you obviously already have the experience. Two, I mean, you're 34 now, so at the time you were 32. I'm assuming, right?
No. So I was 30. It was a year ago. It was like a couple months ago.
Okay.
So,
I'm bugging.
yeah,
24.
so I was 33.
So still very young.
Yeah.
With a lot of experience. A little bit of a grudge in your shoulders, so you can move around, shake around a bit in a little different urgency and whatnot. And then also in the times that we're living, because the NAACP, National Association Advancement for Colored People, which was what,
1909.
09. Sheesh.
Yeah.
Historically is known for their involvement, impact, huge victories in the civil rights movement.
Of course.
And has done a lot for the advancement of the Black community. And I think has really brought it into a lot of different cultures.
Of course.
And advocacy for a lot of different communities. But there has been at times in maybe the younger generation or individuals that would say, I'm not sure how much the NAACP is doing for me now, or what is the role of it now in the ever-shifting economy and a lot of the different battles that are going on. So when I saw that appointment, I was like, ooh, I'm very interested to see where you take this and how you lead it. So can you just talk a little bit, not only about the history of the NAACP, but what was the intrigue for you in this role, and where do you see yourself taking it in this time and the impact that it still has?
Yeah, I mean, it was, it is really an incredible honor to have the blessing of Dr. Dukes. She had been building to create the role that I sit in now, an executive director role, for some time. She ran that organization fiercely for 40 plus years.
40 years.
Yeah. As the state conference
And
president.
was she from Long Island?
She's from Alabama, but she moved up here and she lived in Long Island for a very long time before she moved to Harlem.
Okay.
She was the second, I believe, national president of the NAACP that was a woman. So she was state president, national president, and then came back to the state. And an incredible icon, somebody who I'd been in contact with since 2016 or so. I credit her and Eljoy Williams, our current president, who succeeded her, with the opportunity even to go into the role as commissioner. Two people who called in and say, hey, we have confidence in this young man and what he can do. And so I'm eternally grateful to her because after I left the role as commissioner of OCM, Dr. Dukes was said, nah, you have a place here. You need to bring the talents, bring what you've learned. You've now worked in electoral politics, issue advocacy campaigns. You were counsel in the New York State Senate, all the things. But now you're going to come and focus all of that energy and experience on helping to improve the lives of Black New Yorkers. And she laid that charge at my feet. And it has been a journey so far, just kind of getting to know all the branches. And, the critique that we hear all the time about the relevance of the organization, it started really focused on trying to combat lynching. and create opportunity. And obviously the civil rights movement, Brown versus Board of Ed, all those things that were important markers in history that the NAACP has had a role in. But the work of the branches has never stopped. It's never slowed down. They're just so much more focused in community, right? They're always doing, educational events. They're always doing civic engagement events. They've always been a place. I think what people are feeling in terms of their lack of connection is how much of a role have they played in shaping the dialogue, across the state in a more intentional way around policy making, et cetera. And of course, nationally. For me, the pieces are all here. We have passionate advocates, teachers, and I want to shout out Christine Waters, who's the education committee chair. The way that this woman gets up every day and fights for Black students, and with their parents. When the parents don't know what to do, when a kid is suspended because they got called a name and they retaliated, they call Christine, and she comes and she holds their hand and she fights the institution, she fights the school board, she fights the school district on their behalf. And we have those people everywhere across the state doing that work. It's just not as loud, right? It's not as out there as some of these other groups. And so I don't think my job is to do anything but focus that energy, focus that activity. And I think with the pieces that we have, with the leadership, Eljo Williams is a seasoned political operative. She's been doing this for a long time as well. It's a perfect kind of symbiosis, and it's a perfect moment for me to be here. We have our just so much promise with the people and with the strength of the branches. It's just finding a way to make sure that there's not a conversation that's happening in Albany that they're not a part of, and that's my job.
Yeah. How do you feel about what's happening right now with the attack on DEI and a lot of the promises that were made specifically to Black business owners and the Black economy after the lynching, not the lynching, but the murder of George Floyd and everything that was happening that summer of 2020?
So I was still in the Senate at that time, and I was counsel over basically all of criminal justice, for lack of a better term. And so part of my role at the time was drafting and or negotiating all of the police reform bills that we ended up, signing into law. The banning of chokeholds, the making sure people had the right to record when there's a law enforcement interaction in public. Because normally, law enforcement would say back up or put the phone down, whatever. Now there's an affirmative right for you to engage in that activity. For the creation of a special prosecutor, the Attorney General has, the right now to engage anytime a law enforcement official kills somebody. The Attorney General has to investigate it. As well as the repealing of what we call 50A, which was a way that police disciplinary records were treated as employee records and were thus hidden from public view. We negotiated that. All that happened in that summer. There was such an aggressive move to clear all of these proposals that had been there for some time around criminal justice reform and police reform specifically, that obviously there was going to be a backlash. And that backlash has shown its face in the anti-DEI space. But, what I think is really important for us now is not so much, getting frustrated about the narrative now about DEI or critical race theory or whatever these things that folks have decided to attack. It's how do we build a new infrastructure now that, the guy in Washington is trying to tear it all down, right? How do we create the future Justice Department in a real way that is more effective than the last iteration was, now that this one has been, politicized and torn down. And so I don't see it as a moment of crisis as much as I see it as a moment of opportunity. I am, an architect in what I do. I like to build things, and I think this is a great opportunity for us to find, a way to build a brighter future. And that only works if we're focused, intentional about the intentional consequences that we want to come from this moment, as well as, being real about what did not work in the previous iterations.
I know that there's some work coming up on Long Island, I saw.
Yeah.
With the NAACP. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we have our state convention coming up. Definitely, part of the reason I wanted to be here with you all today is to talk about that. Every year is our 89th convention now. Every year we bring everybody together, all the branches working across the state on these issues, and essentially set the stage for the next year. We talk about the crucial policy debates that we want to engage in, the change that we want to see, but also we train everybody up. All right, this is how we're gonna have strategic community. This is how you're gonna engage in strategic communications. Here's how you're gonna build local campaigns around this issue that you're focused on or concerned about. And so we have this moment of kind of getting back to the basics. And we train and we prepare our leaders, and then they go out and do the work. What's exciting about this year, one, of course, just being here in this moment, it's our first convention without Dr. Dukes, and being able to kind of celebrate her is super important. But she's going to want us to get back to work too.
Yeah.
And so using this moment, using this opportunity just to get everybody in alignment around some of these crucial issues, we will have, Black policy leaders, change makers, critical thinkers, et cetera, from all over, from our legislative leaders, our elected leaders will all be here, and really excited about this opportunity to come together, to train, to engage, and then we go out and do the work.
Where's it at? Where's it at, and how long is it?
We're going to be at the Long Island Marriott. We're going to start the convention
in Uniondale,
Nassau
right?
County, right?
in Uniondale.
Okay.
Yep, Nassau County, right across the street from Hofstra. We're going to be there from October 10th to the 12th is the actual convention. But October 9th, we're going to have what we're calling a Black Policy Roundtable. And so we've got some big names. I'm not going to ruin it yet, but we have some big names of folks leading state-based organizations, elected officials, who are all going to come together for just an honest conversation of how we can stay in alignment around these crucial issues. It's oftentimes far too easy to peel off a group or peel off an elected official if an industry doesn't want to see something to happen. You know what I mean? Like it gets difficult when we're not all moving together. Our power, our collective power is weakened. And so the goal for that Black Policy Roundtable is like, hey, we're getting alignment now, and we're agreeing this is how we're going to move forward. And that's not going to be a one-time conversation. There has to be a continued engagement, but it's important that we do and engage in that kind of way as we start things off.
2 questions for you. First, what would you say right now is the most crucial political problem for the Black community in New York?
Well, I mean, we've heard talk about, affordability as, this most recent campaign, this most recent election, that was the center issue. We've heard about, just our education defunding and the removal or the dismantling of the federal Department of Education and what the impact will be on our state institutions. I would say, honestly, even more than that, people have to remember their power because these things don't happen if there's concern about what is going to happen as the response, as the backlash. We have to start with the retraining and the reminding of people that, like, you yourself have power in this conversation. Things that have gone by the wayside or that we think of now as like not real, like calling your legislator. So many campaigns, call your legislator, and we look at it as like, how is that an effective tool to making change anyway? I've worked as a staffer in these offices. We're counting how many calls come in about a particular issue. We are paying attention when there's a community town hall about a particular event. I would say that in addition to all those real concerns and that, especially the trickle down stuff from Washington, we are moving as if we are not who we are. We're moving as if we hadn't done already what we've done in the past. And I think, the theme of this year's conference is Rooted to Rise. And what we're talking about, remember who we are. Don't act like we haven't already changed the world did these things.
Yeah.
We fought in harder times where there wasn't the spreading of information as quickly as it was. Now, that's a negative at times, but it's also a great way for us to organize. Imagine if social media existed at the time of the civil rights movement, how much easier it would have been to organize and communicate to people what's going on. But the challenge is if people don't know that they can be effective, if people don't know that stuff is happening, like, we lose the opportunity to be effective. And so I would say my biggest concern right now, what I'm most focused on, is getting everybody back in the game. And I'm not a huge social media person. I've never been. Yeah. But the people that I've worked with and built with continue to remind us that, like, if we don't go and do that, then the space becomes, void, and other voices will fill it that are less well-intentioned than we are. So that's something I'm also committed myself to be more engaged, to educate and prepare us to take on these fights.
I love it. Love it. I have one final question. What would you tell Chris Alexander that was watching or reading that Malcolm X book about right now? What would you tell him?
Oof. So much has happened since then.
Yeah.
I tell him that he's powerful.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Yeah, I tell him that he's powerful. And don't forget that no matter what people say, and if you move with good intentions and you stay close to the path and the principles that brought you here, that you'll be successful and that you will change the world. We didn't even talk about it, but legalization was amazing. Being a commissioner, one of the youngest, I think the youngest black commissioner in New York State history, was amazing. It was an honor.
Yeah.
But I started that work trying to stop the harm. And we did that. People are smoking in the streets now.
Yeah.
That we did that. We got 400,000 criminal convictions. We created expungement in New York State. 400,000 convictions expunged from people's records. All because we believe that it's what needed to happen to deal with the injustice. And so I tell him that he was powerful and that if he stayed focused, we'd get it done. It'll take time, but it'll get done.
Love it. And shout out, rest in peace. You mentioned your pops. What was his name?
His name is Thomas.
Thomas
Alexander.
And your mother?
My mother's name is Glennis.
Glennis and Thomas, man. We've been having a lot of conversations, and one thing that definitely continues to come up is the ability to have a grounding, even if it's for a mentor or parents or grandparents. There's a common theme with those that we've been talking to is having that infrastructure and grounding. So appreciate it, man. That's the whole purpose of Policy and Culture, is really having these conversations, being able to talk to individuals that have taken that discussion to a next level. So Chris, we're really grateful. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, guys. And I appreciate the work that y'all do. It really is impactful.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.